I just want to express gratitude, first of all, for you showing up, that we all come together in an effort to wake up and to make our contribution to our world, for this essence that we all share, that's shared with all of creation, this wakefulness that you could say is our true nature and is the true nature of everything. It's the source of everything. So gratitude for that, and that we have as human beings the capacity to actually recognize it. And gratitude that we have the safety of having a home and being able to be on a computer and see each other and come together in this way, that we have the means to be able to do that. So many people right now are really struggling, not only in this country, all over the world. So gratitude for all that we have in place that allows us to be here right now. And gratitude for the teachings that have come down through so many generations, the teachings of liberation. And gratitude for the land that we're in, each of us, wherever we are, this earth of ours, that is the source of these physical bodies that we get to have to experience life, all come from the earth. We're part of the earth. Intrinsically, we're not separate. So gratitude to the Mother Earth, to all the beings that we share this planet with, plants and the beings that fly, the beings that swim, four-leggeds, two-leggeds, all the relatives that share this biosphere with us. Gratitude for their existence. And then gratitude for the ancestors of the land that we're in, back to when they knew how to live in harmony with the rest of creation. Gratitude for that knowledge that we so desperately need right now, and that some of us are beginning to connect to again. And a special gratitude to our dear friend Shahara, who passed away. I think it's just only been a week or so. And I first knew Shahara in 97, when the first Women of Color sitting group began meeting in Marin City, and women used to come from all over the Bay Area. And Shahara was part of that initial group. And Marlene Jones and I were leading that group back then. And, you know, Shahara has been such a powerful part of our community and our POC, Sangha in particular. Such an amazing human being, so much that she contributed, and how she went through the last few years, you know, in dealing with that illness, the courage, the grace, the power, the engagement. She was just a real inspiration. So I definitely, you know, I'm thinking of her right now as I meet with you. So gratitude for her and for her life. And I'm going to go into the refuges. I use 4 refuges, the traditional 3 refuges, and then the 4th refuge is taking refuge in the Supreme Mother. You know, there's a term, the Mother of all Buddhas. And so the Mother of all Buddhas is that state of understanding, of non-conceptual awareness that we all have. We all have that capacity. It's just buried. But that Mother of all Buddhas is that state through which Buddhas become Buddhas. And it's this state of deep, deep understanding. So I also use that refuge. So I'll go through the refuges, and then I'll tell you a little bit the bodhicitta, the second thing that we do. So we'll just start with, you can just, you know, repeat after me or whatever. I know you're all muted, but I'll guide us through. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Supreme Mother, the perfection of sublime knowing. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Supreme Mother, the perfection of sublime knowing. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Supreme Mother, the perfection of sublime knowing. And in order to wake up, we have to aim, our heart. We have to incline ourselves in the right way. And so we practice, not just for ourselves, we practice to liberate the whole thing. And, in Western philosophy, we kind of are stuck thinking of animate and inanimate, but all of creation is evolving to full awakening. The animate, the inanimate, everything. So when the bodhicitta that I use in the study groups is, and I'll repeat it 3 times, for the sake of everything that is arising, may I reach complete understanding. For the sake of everything that is arising, may I reach complete understanding. For the sake of everything that is arising, may I reach complete understanding. And this complete understanding is full awakening, is enlightenment. So our meditation, I'm going to guide us through, and hopefully the sound, I just have my little laptop here, that the sound will carry well enough, because I tend to mumble as I get quiet. So I'll guide us through a meditation, because I want to see, we're suffering from this experience of being this little separate unit that kind of floats around, separate from the earth. We don't really feel in our bones the intrinsic inseparability of the whole thing. So we kind of extracted, and because we're extracted, we suffer and we feel insecure and we're ungrounded and so on. And so as we meet difficulty, there isn't always the capacity there or the grounding. So I'm going to guide us through a meditation to see if we can land back into that inseparability again. So in the past, I have used, our hands, and you can use a sound, and whether you use it now or later, I just want to teach you this, and some of you probably have seen this before, I've done it before with you, that, our hands can really be very helpful. And so we're going to begin the meditation by tuning into the bones. I'm just going to take my glasses off. So, and I make the sound M, like, almost like when you're humming. That sound, first of all, it helps connect to the bones, but it's also very soothing. It's like, even if you remember when you're a baby or you have a baby and you it's very soothing to that baby in all of us. So I'm just going to we're going to begin just by connecting to the bones, and I'm just going to guide us. So beginning, our whole skull, we can do that sound. You can even use your jaw on the back of your head. And moving to your neck, one hand behind and in front. And connecting to the bones in your shoulders. and the long bones of your arms. Going onto your forearms and your hands. And in whatever way is comfortable, just tune into your rib cage and your spine. And then tune into your hips. The whole pelvis is like a big bowl. And so the bones that make the whole pelvic bowl. Then sliding your hands to your thighs. And then your knees. And if you're sitting cross-legged, you might be able to reach your lower legs. But if you're in a chair, you can keep your hands in your knees and just tune into your lower legs and your feet. Just this whole time, tuning into the bones of all that. So now, become aware of the entire bony frame of your body. And in particular, the long bones of your thighs and your lower legs. And tune into the minerals in the bones. And notice what happens as you tune into the minerals in the bones. Sometimes, a self-correcting movement can begin in the body, actually. And now allow the minerals in your bones to connect to the minerals in the earth. And see if you can relax the boundaries of your body to let the skin just sort of be permeable, so you let yourself feel yourself as the whole earth. If it happens without forcing anything, just allowing. Stay connected to the minerals. And now you can use your hand, if it's comfortable, just over your heart. And while feeling yourself as much as possible as the earth or part of it, let yourself become aware of your heart. And do not change anything about it. Whatever you find, whatever feelings are there, whatever movement is there, allowing it to be as it is. This amazing heart that is the seat of the deepest wisdom. In the Tibetan teachings, they always talk about the heart mind. This is where the feeling tone of any experience registers. This is the place where we receive our guidance from, our understanding, our empathy, our compassion. This heart that throughout a life works so hard to love, to care, to take care of, to try to do the best that we're able to. And that it beats sending the blood around this body for the entire time that we're here. It works nonstop. And appreciating the power in this heart, the commitment in this heart, and how much work it does. See if you can begin to feel a sense of appreciation for this core place of our body. And let this heart connect to the heart of the earth. The core of the earth. And this heart of the earth is connected to the heart of the universe. Which is inseparable from the source, which is our own non-conceptual, timeless awareness, the source of everything that manifests. So with the support of the earth, aware of our own physical heart connected to the heart of the earth and the heart of the universe, we come home to our own true nature. Without bypassing the entire manifested world, which is inseparable from the great vastness of space from which everything arises. So let yourself rest for the remainder of the meditation in the spaciousness of the source and the exquisite tenderness of this embodied heart. I'll ring the bell and see if people can hear it. Bring us back. It feels like during the early morning in retreats, you're trying to wake everybody up, walking up and down the hallways. Well, welcome back. Make sure. I think I'm just going to. I only see one set of frames at a time, but I'm going to assume that everybody's back. So the theme that I wanted to explore tonight was the theme of tenderness. And, you know, we don't talk about this very often in Buddhism, you know, naming it specifically like that. And often it feels like when tenderness just arises, it's almost like a state of grace. Like we feel so grateful when, well, I can only speak for myself, but when it arises, there's just this, appreciation that the tenderness is available. And it felt very important for me recently because as the stress of this time that has so many pieces of not knowing, of possible threat, of coming apart of a lot of structures that give us a sense of security and identity and so on, like all that falling apart, there's this insecurity. And in addition to that, then there are very specific, powerful stressors for many people around food. 1 in 8 households in the country right now doesn't have enough food. So the economic impact of the pandemic, the feeling of lack of safety, the oppression becoming so much more explicit. People that we know, I know several people with the virus and people who have died and some who are quite ill. And so all of these things are coming. And I watched myself over the last week when so much was going on, and I could feel myself getting sort of tighter and tighter and tighter and almost like a narrowing. And I felt like I was holding myself really tight without even being aware of it. I just all of a sudden noticed that I had contracted. And just in noticing it, I realized that part of the contraction was, you know, an old pattern from my own life, but also the not being tuned in, not being aware, being so caught up in taking care of what needed to be done that I was just outwardly centered and just functioning and one thing after another, after another, after another, and no time to actually come back home and land. So as I realized that I was just all caught in that, just the noticing itself, all of a sudden there was a little bit of softening. There was a little bit of tenderness. And I remember feeling so grateful for that, because it's not something that we can fabricate and, okay, now I'm going to be tender and we're going to do it. It either lands or it doesn't land on us. You know, we cannot force it to happen. But there's certain things that help. And first of all, noticing when we're really tight, when we're really defended, when we're hard, just being willing to see ourselves and see our patterns, the willingness to look, which takes courage. You know, if we don't have courage to look, you know, a lot is going to go by without us even knowing about it. So as I started to look into this, and I thought, tenderness is in a way a byproduct of our practice and the process of waking up, because as we wake up, there's less and less and less defending and more the capacity to actually be with what's here without being so caught up in manipulating everything so that we can have it the way we want it, the way we need it, to not be so propelled by our fear. And so then I started looking at it, and it turns out that there is a Tibetan word for it, tewa. And I think it's, I don't know if I put it in the chat, but it's TSEWA. And it refers to the innate tenderness in our hearts. And this is, when I was doing the meditation and I was talking about that, there's an exquisite vulnerability in our hearts. That exquisite vulnerability is what allows us to know reality directly. If we did not have that vulnerability, we would not be able to notice all the nuance, all the amazing, exquisite aspects of what it means to be in a body in this life. From the amazing beauty of a flower or a bee or the look in our baby's eyes, or the love of a partner, or just the amazing beauty in this life. If we did not have that exquisite sensitivity in the heart, we would not be able to register that. But that exquisite sensitivity also makes it so that we really also experience the pain. And part of what happens, as we develop from the time we're babies, we begin this life with, a very open mind, because we don't make concepts as babies. As babies, we basically are this open awareness, taking all of the experience in and being completely curious and undefended and just open to the whole, everything that's going on. We're taking it in. There's no conceptual framework that decides, I don't like that, I want this one. There's none of that. There's just this utter openness. And with awakening, we get to a similar openness of being able to actually see everything without being so controlled by our preconceived ideas and by our preferences. So there's this, the same way that we begin life with this utter openness, as we awaken, there's a similar kind of openness that is non-conceptual, except that as an adult, we have a whole life experience. And so the openness is existing within the framework of this profound, deep understanding. So with that kind of openness, whatever we see, even our own predicament, like just recently I took actually this trauma, what's it called? Trauma literacy class through Zen Center that was taught by some friends. And part of what they were describing is just like when we're under stress, we go into certain patterns, and they describe the patterns. They use the analogy of different animals, like a lion versus a turtle versus a hummingbird versus, like our coping strategies. And just like seeing the patterns in my own family, like between mine and then understanding why we don't quite see each other or understand each other, is because we have such a different strategy. And but then that understanding, the understanding brings openness. Understanding brings the capacity to love. The understanding allows us to drop the defenses. So when I was talking about at the beginning of our time together and doing the bodhicitta, we changed the word, for the sake of everything that's arising, may I reach complete, originally it's may I reach complete enlightenment. But some people, had reaction to the word enlightenment. So we started to use understanding, because enlightenment is complete understanding, profound understanding. And so going back to this, what I was describing just in my own personal experience, like just getting even a little glimpse of like the dynamic between myself and my daughter, for example. Then there was this tenderness in my heart, like, oh, no wonder she has a hard time with me. Oh, no wonder I have a hard time with her. Like it was just this lightness of heart. The understanding opened the door. So, when we get really stressed out and we get so tight, we not only don't have access to each other, we don't have access to ourselves. And if we don't have access to ourselves, we're just like treading water. There's no real understanding that's possible, because we're really incapacitated by the tight range of our perceptual field. Our perceptual field gets very tight. So the meditation practice, we train in Vipassana, we train the mind so that it can focus. With the Brahma Viharas, we train the mind heart so that it's inclined and wishing, and the relationship between the well-wishing and just the insight piece, they're completely linked. So the more well-wishing we do, the more the insight can open. And the more the insight opens, the more we're able to love and have the right inclination or a positive inclination. So they go hand in hand. So some of the quotes, there's a book by Zigar Control Rinpoche, which I think they've already listed there, which is the one book I've seen on Sewa, on the, I think that the title of the book is Training in Tenderness. And I think that would be a good one for most people to have. And I'm not sure if I'm going to get to tonight talking about it, but Sherry Mitchell, Sacred Instructions, I've been recommending that book recently in a lot of circles, and I've done it here before, I think, because from the indigenous tradition, the idea that when we find the capacity to really listen, to tune into ourselves, to feel our connection with the earth, the guidance is there. The guidance as to what we need to do, how we need to be, what's really the point, arises from within. All these teachings, all these things we read, all the stuff we do, they support. But really, the deep understanding comes from within. And it comes from within because we have our true nature. Because inside, that is our birthright. That depth of understanding is our birthright, and that is unassailable. So as we are born, and we have this amazing openness as babies, as we start to accumulate experience, and we know ourselves as just this knowing, this kind of direct knowing without content. I mean, that's how we experience ourselves as babies. And as we accumulate experience, and then, we develop the capacity to to remember, and then to extrapolate, to have concepts begin to form in the mind, and then we start to make associations and so on, and then the conceptual framework starts coming on board. And then as that comes on board, most people don't grow up in households where they're enlightened people or people who can reflect back that non-conceptual awareness that we start with. So pretty soon, our sense of what we are starts shifting from that openness into the content of experience. So then we think that's what we are, this series of experiences and what we have extrapolated from it. Then we latch onto that, and that's what we are. And discussing this gets a little tricky because, in spiritual circles, there's been so much bypass about oppression. And so, when we think about how we're trapped in our identity, which we are, we are in the deepest sense of the word. But this is why to understand non-duality is so important. That, see how I can come at this in a way that's not too long-winded. True freedom involves the capacity to completely honor the utter vulnerability of our humanness, to honor the way we get wounded, to acknowledge that, whether it's from the family, whether it's from the social structures, wherever it's from, to actually know that directly and not bypass it, and to understand at a deep level, just like the Buddha did, what is the primary source of suffering. And the primary source of suffering is that we don't really know what we actually really are. And we think we just are this collection of experiences and what we've made of it. So we need to be able to recognize that inner essence that is utterly free and unassailable, while at the same time the tenderness to see our predicament and to see what belongs in each of our lives. Some of us have lives with a lot of difficult circumstances. And being able to accept that and not start comparing it, and which I certainly have done plenty, looking at other people who, quote unquote, seem to have it easier and comparing and then suffering over that. But just if we open our hearts completely to what's on our plate, what belongs in our life, and not that we don't work to address the pain, but to open our hearts to it, is the only way to real freedom. It's not that we excuse other people hurting us, or we don't move when we need to move out of circumstances and so on. I mean, we have to do what needs to be done, but it's the fact that we allow ourselves to know what is real, what is really happening, and that we ideally over time can get to really recognize both this essence that is free and the conditioned heart that suffers. And when we are able to see that, there's just this tenderness that comes up, because we all suffer. We suffer in different ways, but we all suffer. And that's what moved the Buddha. And some people say, Buddhism is kind of depressing because it's all about suffering. But if we don't open our hearts to our own suffering, we are not, our joy is going to get that much smaller. They go hand in hand. And I would dare say that our capacity for joy is directly proportional to how open we are to pain, to the painful side of life. There's when they one of the comments about this book on the practice of tenderness. It's described, when filled with tenderness and affection, our heart can give us the most pure and profound happiness that exists and enables us to radiate that happiness to others. This happiness arises from within. There's a happiness that arises from being in touch with our essence that, believe me, it's beyond any other happiness that comes from the external world. In Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about the wish-fulfilling gem. It is so simple. And there's a feeling like there's nothing wanting when we are in touch with that. It's not about lining up everything on the outside and having all these external objects. It's a fulfillment that is not dependent on external objects. And another comment says, this simple yet life-changing attitude makes our own life meaningful and has the power to heal our world. This tenderness is the root source of all that is truly beneficial. So the source of what is beneficial. There's, in Tibetan Buddhism, there are all these deities, and, initially in the beginning of training, sometimes we can take them literally, but really these deities are like symbols of qualities of our own mind, of our own being. And so Samantabhadra has two aspects, Samantabhadra and Samantabhadri. It's like, Samantabhadra is like the origin of everything, but it's also a bodhisattva, a being who's dedicated their life to the liberation of all beings. And so Samantabhadra is referred to as universally good. So when we are in touch with that essence, there's a feeling of utter purity, of utter goodness. And sometimes when I first would hear these teachings, they seem really far-fetched. But as you go through your day, because this is inside each of us, as we go through our days, there'll be moments where you get little glimpses. And it's a little glimpse where your mind is not generating thoughts. It's just this simple openness, simple silence, simple tenderness. And it's like this intimacy in that intimate moment. It could be doing something really ordinary, but there's this intimacy and tenderness. And that is like that because we are in touch with our essence. And our essence is exquisitely tender. And part of our suffering is, we live in a culture where there's nobody saying, look at that, that's important. Oh, pay attention to that. So what I want to invite you as you go through your days, pay attention to when things get quiet. Your mind, your heart is quiet, and tune into the tenderness as it arises. And if you cannot find any tenderness, which we go through periods where it's just not around in our perception, then notice that, because the doorway to freedom is always through where we find ourselves. So if what we're noticing is that we're tied up and there's, we're uptight, then opening the heart to that. And opening the heart to that can start to loosen the grip. And that's how we make our way. It's just to accept, to allow, to open, to notice, to notice, to notice. Most of us could use a little bit more mirroring, as they say in psychology. We all need to be received. We all need to be understood. It's a basic human right, a human need. But we can also give some of that to ourselves by turning our attention towards our own experience, by approaching ourselves, with more tenderness as opposed to the harshness that many of us can do, like feeling like we're never enough and whatever we do is never enough. And so we're always striving and working so hard to just, get everything done or gain acceptance or whatever it is, just that driving energy. So to remember and to notice, maybe sometimes if we're really very much that way, is to just notice the price of that attitude, what it does to us. And through the noticing, the door starts to open. We cannot force things to change. We can only notice. And it's the tenderness in the heart that arises to meet the predicament that starts freeing us up. So the tenderness that allows us to be with everything that's arising without sacrificing our heart. Because sometimes in order to meet what arises, we just shut down. And then we lose our own connection with ourselves. And sometimes, that's the best we can do. And when there's a lot going on and we our trauma patterns get kicked up, that we will go there. But then as soon as we're able to, and we notice, to be able to just to notice that that's happened, and then to bring that loving tenderness to our direct experience. And as we started, with the meditation, connecting to the earth, I have found, I've done plenty of different kinds of Buddhist practices over it's now about 43, 45 years. And the connection with the earth, reestablishing that connection, I have found that more powerful than just the power, and it's the power for the embodied experience here and now. And that connection with the here and now of the embodied experience allows the mind to open to the unconditioned. So it's like we need both. We need to regain our understanding of our connection with this planet. All these Buddhas have come through this planet. They've all embodied through this planet that we know of. So our connection to the planet is really key to then letting the mind go beyond all the concepts. It's like being able to have both the embodied experience while being aware of the vastness, the space, the vast space that is our original nature, that it's coexisting with the embodied experience. They're inseparable because there's a movement in and out of that vastness that sustains the embodiment. The embodiment is not static, it's always moving. So the full view includes the whole range. and realizing that we don't have to prefer one or the other. The minute we start preferring, we're out of that freedom of non-duality. So I'm going to stop now so that we can, I would love to hear any questions, any comments, just to give you a chance to presence yourself. We didn't do any breakout groups today. So I'm going to just give you a prayer that I used to do prostrations with. And you can, if you want to use it, to the Great Mother, within and without, I prostrate beyond all duality. Please protect us, remove our obstacles, and guide us through our obscurations into full freedom and understanding, that we may be of benefit to ourselves and all that is arising. May it be so. Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, it's not so simple. In addition to what I was talking about, there is, and there's some work that's been done by a psychologist. I'm trying to think of his name. I'm having a senior moment, but I'll think in a moment. But our brain also, I mean, aside from the current circumstances, which I will say something about that, but our brain, because of survival, tends to connect to difficult or threatening experience much more readily than to joyful experiences. So when something threatening happens, we look at it and we, even after the fact, we'll play it over and play it over and play it over. And so what that does to our brain is actually establishes pathways in the brain. And it's a survival strategy. We want to remember that which is threatening so that, we don't die, the next time something happens. But the problem is when we have pleasant experience, beautiful experiences, we dispense with it within a couple of seconds. I mean, in a few seconds, we move on. Oh yeah, great. Oh, then you move on. And something difficult happens and you're there. And so they've done studies that, painful experience goes into long-term memory right away. And the pleasant experience, in order for it to go into long-term memory, we have to hold it. So that when something, you walk outside and there's a sunset and this beautiful sunset, then you have to look at the sunset and almost like remember what's happening in the body. I said, look at the sunset and like entertain it long enough so that it lands in your brain. It's actually, we have to train in noticing beauty and joy, So that's what I would say, it's almost like we have to do a practice to establish new pathways in our brain so that we're able to let the pleasant land more. But going back to what I mentioned before, if we're very defended, we tend to get universally numb. It's not just numb to pain or numb to this, we kind of like get numb. And so when we get shut down, whether it's wonderful or terrible or whatever, we just don't have that range. Our heart can't quite feel because we've got this shield over it. And there are times when we need to do that. But, the process of waking up is a process, Aji Ashanti said, you can't leave a stone unturned. We got to keep looking at everything. And that's how we free ourselves. By the understanding that arises from the looking. And then the tenderness comes when we see how it is for all of us. And many times what we experience is so universal. When you were talking about the sadness, I've been really sad recently, really sad. and thinking, God, I can't shake the sadness. And the thing is, we're not separate from the whole. So sometimes we're experiencing our own stuff, but sometimes we're just feeling the general sad feel that we're in. And it's appropriate for what's happening. It's appropriate. And so when the beautiful sunset happens, we have to really like hang out with that sunset with our whole body so that we help. It gives us the little cushion for everything else that we're facing right now. You know what somebody said, what is enlightenment? Ask a question, and this Zen priest said, an appropriate response. So being able to be appropriate to the circumstances is key. So we cannot let ourselves be vulnerable in a place where we're really exposed or around a lot of people. You know, it just the turning to our own vulnerability, our own tenderness. You know, it's like in the middle of your meditation, or you're in the kitchen, or it just depends. We need to feel safe in order to turn towards our vulnerability. If we have a lot of trauma, and by turning to our attention to our bodies or experience our vulnerability, starts to kick up things that we feel like we're not able to be with, then we need to get help. Then it's appropriate to address it, you know, with someone who could help you with the trauma. Because we know we all have trauma. It's just a matter of degree. And, you know, and how much work we've done and what work remains to be done. And we need very, you know, trauma is addressed in very specific ways. It's not just talk therapy. The body is crucial. And so, you know, in giving a talk like this is sort of general, but for specifically, I want to acknowledge that if we are getting triggered in terms of our trauma, that needs very specific attention that I'm not able to you know, to address that at the moment like this. Just be appropriate. If that's happening, don't push yourself, you know. Be loving towards yourself as you see that, then go to and get the help that is appropriate to your situation. And so I just want to dedicate the merit before we close. Whenever, you know, all the work that we do, just like in the bodhicitta, all the practice, we are part of a single field of awareness. So whatever work we do in our own predicament, in our own life to free ourselves has an impact on the whole. So in the Tibetan tradition, we always dedicate the merit of our being together. So by the merit generated through our practice, may our biosphere come to know a new state of freedom and understanding. May human beings reconnect to our original nature and open ourselves in humility to receive the guidance about how to live from this point forward. May understanding, justice, peace, and love prevail in our world. May all beings be free. May all beings be free. May all beings be free. And thank you so much for your beautiful hearts Till next time.